The original Yu-Gi-Oh series is kind of weird to go back and watch. But what? No, not this Yu-Gi-Oh series. The first Duel Monster series, that one. In the sense that I'm not really sure how much of it holds up. Now, don't get me wrong, the characters are memorable, some of the duels are awesome, and it's a good time overall, but I don't think I like it nearly as much as GX and 5Ds, mainly 5Ds, but I'm probably not going to go too much further than that. Because as much as a compelling character as Yugi can be, I don't find him to be the most interesting character, or even the best character. To me, that role goes to somebody else. No, not Seto Kaiba.
You're a third-rate duelist with a fourth-rate deck.
This is a brash, sometimes arrogant, yet lovable, courageous, and kind-hearted duelist. The Godfather Games, capiche? Joey Wheeler. Before we go any further, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you feel like it, or if you just want to yell some Joey Wheeler quotes at me in the comments. Anyways, my name's Alex, let's get to it. Joey Wheeler, the somewhat dim-witted best friend of Yugimoto.
That guy is Yugimoto, and I happen to be his best friend, Joey Wheeler.
Really doesn't seem that interesting at the start. He's basically just learning how to play the game, and he even loses to Taya in one of the early episodes. But right around the time Duelist Kingdom starts, we learn that Joey's actually fighting for the prize money of the tournament to help save his sister who's going blind. Wow. Stuff this dark in a kid's show? Sure, I'm up for it. Depending on what version you watch, you also learn that Joey and his sister were separated when their parents got divorced. It's also heavily implied that Joey's father was an alcoholic, a gambler who did not treat Joey very well. That's the most I'll say about it. But he still manages to become a kind-hearted person after he and Tristan spend a lot of time bullying Yugi early on. It's, like I said, it's really weird to rewatch at times. With his semi-normal hair and incredible Brooklyn accent in tow, he accompanies Yugi to Duelist Kingdom. We see a really great sign of their friendship early on when Joey nearly risks his own life to save Yugi's Exodia pieces. While he doesn't manage to get all of them back, it's still a really nice sign of their friendship. Despite the fact that even had he saved them all, I'm not sure Yugi would have used all 5 of them. One of the first duels Joey has is against Mai Valentine. At first, he asks Mai why she's dueling, and he tries to explain to her that he fights for his sister and for his friends, while she basically says, you know, money, jewelry, cars, all this other sorts of stuff. And he's able to sniff out her perfume in her cards, because she claims to be psychic. Yeah, like I said, this show gets super weird sometimes. It's also during this duel that we see Time Wizard, a card that Yugi gave him very early on that helps age his baby dragon into Thousand Dragon, and helps destroys the Harpies, and Joey gets his first win. It's a nice thing to see, and it's also nice to see how Joey is already starting to affect Mai, which we'll talk about later. He then duels Rex Raptor thanks to Mai, and he tries to duel on his own to show his own strength because everybody had basically been picking on him throughout the first several episodes, including his own friends, which really didn't hold up that well. I mean, who did Tristan ever beat in a duel? Tell me. Anyways, Joey ends up betting his Time Wizard against Rex Raptor's Red Eyes Black Dragon. Yeah, you know, the guy who had the dinosaur deck having a dragon card as his ace. That didn't even make sense back then. He ends up winning the duel, some star chips, and Rex's Red Eyes Black Dragon, all the way up until he ends up having to duel Kaiba, and this is not a great duel. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't expecting Joey to beat Kaiba this early on, but Nothing about this duel really shows Joey's strengths, and it's kind of disappointing. And after that, we just get Kaiba berating Joey about how he's a dog or a whatever. Then again, I have to question how the hell Kaiba knew that, because if Joey's nose was good enough to smell all those perfumes, maybe he is part dog, but I don't know. He starts having these really weird, specific nightmares involving Kaiba and him in a dog suit, which I think might be a fetish of some kind. Never mind, I don't even want to think about that. But he ends up going on his own, getting kidnapped by Bandit Keith and his goons, and beats Bones in a duel. Fun fact, this was the first time that Time Wizard actually ended up failing him in a duel. But overall, he manages to win, and then he and Yugi progress through the cave, and end up fighting the Paradox Brothers, in a duel that, you really have to suspend your disbelief for this, because the rules just really don't exist, which makes the older Yu-Gi-Oh! Series kind of hilarious to watch sometimes.
Now, Stone Soldier, destroy the moon!
He then ends up trying to attack Bandit Keith when they see each other next with his fist of cartoonish sound effects, because apparently that's what getting punched sounds like.
Miss me. Whoops. Too slow. Can't this little grudge of yours wait?
But sadly, Joey's entry card ends up getting stolen by Bandit Keith. He then breaks down about it because the winner of the tournament ended up with prize money that he was going to use to pay for his sister's operation. But just when all hope seems lost, Mai ends up returning Joey's kindness by giving him her entry card so he can compete. It's a really touching moment between the two and symbolizes that they actually have become friends. He ends up beating Bandit Keith and has to duel Yugi in the finals. And before that, we get this really awesome montage of them being friends and all the moments they've been together, accompanied by the awesome song, No Matter What. Seriously, every Yu-Gi-Oh! Fan needs to appreciate that song. He gets really close to beating Yugi, and it's actually his best duel so far, but ends up losing due to Yugi and some shenanigans. Yeah, this is the part where I really started to lose interest, because it really felt like Yugi was just pulling these rules out of his ass, which to an extent he was. Afterwards, there's another tournament coming up, Battle City, and this is when Joey Wheeler really comes into his own as both a duelist and as a character. He ends up losing his Red Eyes Black Dragon card to the Rare Hunters, and when Yugi wins it back, Joey gives him a speech about how he's not ready to take back his Red Eyes. He wants to help Yugi save the world from Merrick and the Rare Hunters, and it's a really awesome moment. That gets flashed back to about 6 or 7 times an episode for the rest of the season. His first duel is against Esparoba, who claims to be a psychic, and although the psychic nonsense gets shut down relatively early, Joey still finds himself struggling and remembers that Serenity is rooting for him in the hospital, and it's a really touching moment where we really learn where Joey's inner strength comes from, besides just his friends. It's a really nice touch, and it's especially nice when he ends up beating Roba. Next up is Weevil, who gets a kid to put a card in Joey's deck that basically helps Weevil cheat throughout the duel. Overall, it's probably my least favorite out of all the duels, just because it's just reaffirming more stuff about Joey that we already knew, but not everything can be a home run. Lastly, he ends up dueling with Mako Tsunami, while also incorporating some pretty strange dances in the early beginnings of this duel. But he teaches Mako a good lesson about moving on, and he ends up beating him. This is what the writers did spectacularly. We saw each and every one of Joey's duels, and while they weren't all spectacular, they all found a way to either reaffirm or develop his strength as a duelist. It is brilliant. He also had somewhat of a duel against Kaiba at this part, but that got interrupted, and we'll talk about that more later. Sadly, the good times have to be put on hold at this point because Joey ends up getting kidnapped by the Rare Hunters and brainwashed by Merrick. He ends up having to duel Yugi in a really emotional, great duel that just shows how much the two genuinely care about each other, and a lot of the flashbacks, while sadly overdone, are, I'd say, serviceable, definitely help in terms of building the tension in the story. Not to mention, the best part about this is Tristan just completely destroying a whole bunch of Rare Hunters. I mean, sure, it's off screen, but it's the most he's ever going to do. Fun fact about this duel, there was no talk of Shadow Realms or anything, even in the 4Kids version. It was simply, you guys are gonna drown, so hope you can swim. But there's an awesome moment of Serenity finally taking off her bandages from the surgery, and the first thing she sees is her brother Joey saving Yugi's life. It's an incredible moment, and it makes it even more cathartic when you see Serenity jump in and save Joey's life. It's a really heartwarming moment that honestly just feels warranted. My favorite flashback out of all of these is probably when Yugi gives Joey the prize money from Duelist Kingdom. It's a really heartwarming moment that I definitely didn't cry at, so let's just get that idea out of your heads. Shut up. Finally, we get to the finals, and Joey ends up dueling Odeon, and despite the fact that Odeon clearly had the better deck and probably should have won, Joey ends up winning, and he's probably the first person to realize that Odeon is Odeon and not Merrick, because, you know, it was hard to tell, I guess. He ends up teaming up with Yugi in order to take on the Big Five, and even includes my Cyber Heartbeat in his own deck. This further showing the bond between the two. After Joey failed to save Mai against Merrick, he felt personally responsible. He even made a speech to Taya about how he wanted to take down Merrick, how he made this personal, how he wanted to save the friend that he failed to save in the first place. Finally, in the final four, it's Yugi, Kaiba, Merrick, and Joey in a one-on-one-on-one-on-one duel. Yeah, it was weird, but basically, this is when Joey has one of his finest moments, in my opinion. He tells Yugi, stop protecting me, stop finding ways to coddle me. If you really respect me as a duelist, you will take me down, you will show me the respect that you show everybody else, and take me seriously. It's a really awesome moment considering how many people had just seen him as sidekick at that point. Oddly enough, he ends up dueling against Merrick in the finals, and this duel is kind of a mixed bag, because it's not necessarily that we hadn't grown to love Joey at this point, but Merrick really didn't have that interesting of a deck. It was more based on torturing the opponent rather than actual strategy, which really came back to bite him in the end. And the worst part is, the part that everybody knows at this point, Joey survives the Winged Dragon of Raw's effect. He survives the attack and everything, and all he has to do is say, Gearfried, attack, and then he collapses and gets disqualified. Okay, I don't have a co-host right now to stop me. I've been holding this in for a very, very long time, so I think it's time I get this off my chest. Are you ready? Are you sure? Alright, here we go. Why? Why did you have Joey lose? This whole season, 2 seasons, was about him getting better as a duelist. Him beating people who you never really thought he had a chance against. Him beating Roba, him beating Weevil, him beating Mako, him beating Odeon. Only to have him lose to Merrick by a technicality? Are you kidding me? That is terrible. This whole arc was about him saying, hey Yugi, I'm gonna help you take down Merrick. Him losing Mai and saying, I'm going to save Mai. I'm going to find a way to bring her back. Because these two are clearly into each other, no matter what anybody says. Not that they had to be together. Platonic relationships are always cool and always warranted. But this was about him. Here's what they should have done. Have Joey beat Merrick. Have him get the Winged Dragon of Raw. You can still keep the collapsing moment, but have Yugi be distracted by that, and have Kaiba beat Yugi. So Kaiba thinks to himself, oh, I'm Seto Kaiba. I have the 2 Egyptian God cards now, and I'm dueling this mutt. I'm the new king of games. Only to have Joey come back to life, basically, because he's not even sent to the Shadow Realm. He's just in the hospital. But have him wake up, have him stand up, and have him beat Kaiba, because if losing to Yugi in the first episode almost broke Kaiba, imagine the feeling of him losing to Joey Wheeler, somebody who he never showed any respect to. It writes itself. And a lot of people are saying, oh, well, Joey doesn't have all this overpowered stuff. Well, that's what makes him an underdog. This would have capped off his story perfectly. But lol, Yugi wins. And you know, they could have made this work even after the fact. Joey ends up waking up and his friends have to break it down to him that he lost to Merrick. Now granted, what I do like about this is particularly from Duke's side of things and Tristan's side of things, because despite giving Joey a ton of crap, they are clearly the most shaken up that he's back, and you can tell how much they really care about him. That I will give it credit for. But then they kind of undo everything when Joey and Kaiba duel, and then Joey loses to Kaiba again. Can they give this guy something, please? There's honestly not too much more to say about it than that. I mean, there are a couple of filler arcs, like the Seal of Orichalcos / Waking the Dragons arc, where Joey does get the Claw of Hermos, a pretty awesome card. Seriously, it took them years to finally release these cards, and the little kid in me was super happy to see that. He ends up being guilty that Mai got brainwashed by the Orichalcos guys, which was a nice follow-up to everything he'd been through, especially considering how guilty he felt that he wasn't the one able to save her. But sadly, that arc itself is just such a total mess that it almost didn't even matter. What did matter, however, was him versus Valen in order to, I guess, save Mai from them, which, I mean, I guess was cool, but they end up having this armor-style duel because Valen ends up using an armor deck, which basically you'd think let him summon armor monsters, but no, it just lets him put the armor on himself, and then Joey ends up putting some armor on himself, and it ends up in a ridiculously stupid yet awesome Saint Seiya-style battle between the two. Seriously, how come those cards have not been invented in real life? He ends up beating Valen in a, once again, ridiculously stupid yet awesome duel, and then he duels Mai again, and he collapses in it. Man, this guy's stamina is not great. There are a lot of jokes I could make out of that, but I'm too mature for that. I'll let the comment section do that. But for the most part, that's kind of where Joey's story ends. It's implied that he and Serenity are living together again with one of their parents, and that's awesome to see. But there was a lot more they could have done with him. Heck, they had him and Yugi face off, presumably for the Red Eyes Black Dragon, but that duel was off screen. I mean, it's implied that Joey won, but implications don't mean a whole lot. I'd rather would have just seen it. But some missteps aside, Joey Wheeler really had an awesome arc. Going from a bully delinquent to a genuinely loving, compassionate character who would do anything for his friends was a joy to see. Not all of his moments were great, but not all of them necessarily had to be. He had some stupid lines, some stupid jokes, but that's what makes him. Not to mention the meme, you all know what it is. Despite being shown in a couple of different scenes, during his first duel with Mai in Season 4, we see the infamous Joey Wheeler meme. And it is glorious. Glorious! In all seriousness though, this is how you write an underdog. Slowly but surely going from a weakling to one of the most accomplished characters in the whole show. And like I said, there are definitely some missteps. He should have been the winner of Battle City for sure. But for what we got, Joey Wheeler is, was, and for my mind, will always be the best part of the original Yu-Gi-Oh series. But what did you guys think of Joey? Did you think he was overrated, underrated? What parts of his character arc would you have changed? Just let me know, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Side note, it's not that Yu-Gi-Oh characters are the only characters I'm going to do analyses of, but they seem to be the most interesting, and I'll probably do another one very soon, but I'm not going to say his name because I know what happens when I say the name Chaz. There it is. Anyways, guys, be sure to like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you next time. And now, some words from the man himself.
What's up, anime egotists? Joey Wheeler here, the godfather of games. Hey, listen, Alex asked me to give you a shout-out, so I'm doing that. And as this is my very first cameo, I thought I'd do something a little special. I'm actually filming this right outside the very building where, here it is, the voice of Joey was born. That used to be the headquarters of 4Kids Productions. That's where this voice was born many, many years ago. It ain't there anymore, and it's not in Brooklyn, but what are you going to do? So anyway, I'm here in Manhattan, sunny, autumnal Manhattan, not in Brooklyn, I apologize. But I want to thank you for watching, because without you guys watching, there ain't no show. So always believe in the heart of the cards, and more importantly, believe in yourself. Because in the entire multiverse, there ain't nobody like you, and that makes you special beyond measure. Thanks again, hope you enjoyed it, and stay groovy.